People asked for it. People demanded it. Here it is, the top Marvel books from 1990. Up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hey comic book community, this is Jim from Bronzeville Comics, and I have another 1990s list, but this time we're going to Marvel Comics. And again, these comics were pretty highly produced. 1990 was before the explosion of the market, and which preceded the crash, but still a lot of these books were very highly printed, but not all of them. And that will lead us to a surprise at the #1 position. As a matter of fact, of the books in the top 10 on this list, only 2 of them have confirmed MCU connections. Let's start at number 10, and that's Transformers number 73. This is a book that's had 2 9.8 sales in the last 2 months of $270 in December and a $345 sale in November. It's a book that you could probably get for maybe about $20 raw, maybe a little bit more. Transformers, the print runs were decreasing considerably at this point, and so they are fairly scarce, and there are a lot of Transformers books that fit that bill. We go to number 9 on the list, and it's XMen Annual number 14, the first cameo appearance of Gambit. A lot of controversy. Is it really a cameo? Is it really his first appearance? It's considered his first cameo appearance because annuals were printed starting back in the 60s in an attempt to increase sales, and they would increase sales back in the 60s and 70s by staying on the rack the entire summer rather than only being out for a month. So it would give people who were just coming into a newsstand, a kid shopping for comics, multiple opportunities to pick up the book. And comics always increased their production in the summers because kids had more time off and more time to read comics. So the XMen Annual 14, in terms of the storytelling, comes after 266. But it was released before 266. It's considered Gambit's first appearance. It's a book that sells for about $30 to $40 for a high copy raw, and an average of $340 in a CGC 9.8. In December, there have been 2 sales in December of a 9.8 for $360 and $300, and a high of $653 for a 9.8 in August of this year. There has been a 9.9 that sold for over $10,000, and this book was a square-bound comic, and so the cover was glued on. Square bounds are harder to get in higher grade because there can be more spine splits. Books that are only 31, 32 years old don't get as many spine splits as books from the early 70s and the 60s, but it still occurs. There were no staples in this book. The entire thing was held together by glue, unlike the square bound books of the Silver and Bronze Age. So a 9.9 was really hard to find. We move on to number 8 on the list, and number 8, this is something that we're going to see as a trend on this list and also in our honorable mentions. This is Marvel Tales 235. Now, Marvel Tales was a reprint book. Going back to the 60s and through the 70s and 80s, it reprinted older issues of SpiderMan. So it was an opportunity for readers to buy books that they didn't really have access to in the back issue market. 235, it's got a Todd McFarlane cover, and it reprints Marvel Team Up #1. He did maybe about a dozen covers of Marvel Tales in this era. The most recent sale of this book was a $350 sale in December, which is the high sale. And the average sale is about $350 in 9.8. Raw sales you could probably get for maybe under $20 raw. This is a book that you might be able to find in a back issue bin because a lot of people just overlook Marvel Tales. Number 7 on the list is Marvel Age number 90, and this is also on the list because of a Todd McFarlane cover. The most recent sale is $490 in a CGC 9.8 in December. There was a sale of $235 in November. The high sale is $600 in May. There aren't many sales, and they're kind of all over the place. Raw sales for a high grade are in the $20 to $40 range. Number 6 on the list is Silver Surfer number 44, and this is one of the 2 books that has an MCU connection. This is the first appearance of the Infinity Gauntlet. So this book has kind of hit its peak in the past, although there have been recent sales that have been strong. $475 for a CGC 9.8 in November, and then in October there were sales of $360, $475, and $500. Recent raw sales are in the $30 range, and the 9.8 average is $419. Number 5 on the list, this is the other one that has an MCU connection. We haven't seen this character in costume, but we've seen his alter ego, and that's Black Knight number 1, the first issue of a 4-issue limited series, which is the first solo series starring Dane Whitman as Black Knight. There was a solo Black Knight back in the 1950s from Atlas Books, starring Sir Percy, the ancestor of Dane Whitman. And we saw Dane Whitman in the Eternals movie. We know that he's going to become the Black Knight in the MCU. So this book has taken off in the last year. CGC sales average about $419. The most recent sale in December was $360, and the high sale of $552 in November. So this kind of built on that kind of early Eternals crest, and then it's kind of cooled off a little bit since. The raw sales are in the $35 range. Black Knight will be coming back, so this is a book that does have some promise. Number 4 on the list is Ghost Rider number 1, the second ongoing Ghost Rider series, and it's the first appearance of Daniel Ketch as the second Ghost Rider. This is a book that sells for about, on average, $523 in a CGC 9.8. The most recent 9.8 sale was $500 all the way back in September, and there's been a high sale of $576 in August. The high grade raw sales are over $50 in this, and now I'm filming this on December 29th. It'll be released on December 30th. And just this week, there have been rumors that Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead may be portraying a version of Ghost Rider in the MCU at some point. If that casting news comes out, expect this book to increase in value. Already, the first appearance of Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider from 1972 in Marvel Spotlight 5 has been a hot book this year, as has Ghost Rider number 1, the first of his ongoing series, which debuted in 1973. We're going to move to number 3 on the list, and this is a long-standing favorite. That's New Mutants 87, the first appearance of Cable. We have seen Cable in the movies, played by Josh Brolin in Deadpool 2, and this is a book that on average in a CGC 9.8 goes for about $609. The most recent sale is $690, and the high sale was $859 back in June. The raws are expensive. High-grade raws, you're probably going to have to pay close to $200 for. So this is certainly not a book that's under their radar. One thing to look out for is that there is a second print. The first print has a red background. The second print kind of has like a bronze-ish background. That's not worth nearly as much. Going to number 2 on the list. And we kind of previewed this already. Number 2 on the list is Uncanny XMen number 266, the first full appearance, certainly the first cover appearance of Gambit. We have seen Gambit in the movies. He was in the Wolverine, and everyone expects that Gambit will return when the X-Men come into the MCU. Average sales in a CGC 9.8 are $1,040. The most recent sale of $1,140 in December, and the high back in April of $1,507. To get a high-grade raw book of this, you're going to have to probably spend $200 to $300. Now, the market has dictated this is the money book, much like Incredible Hulk 181. If you compare the 2 covers, this is a much more desirable cover. Gambit is front and center on the cover. It's clear that he's in the book. So this is the one that people gravitate towards too. Annuals are a little unusual because if people are buying runs, they might not buy the annuals, they might just buy the book itself. A little bit easier to get in high grade, but still a high grade, a 9.8 is north of $1,000. And again, this probably does have room to grow. I don't think I'd be spending $1,000 on a 9.8 if I could get a deal on one, or if I could get a nice raw copy for less than fair market value. I might look into that because the mutants aren't in the MCU yet, and the market is shown. You come into the MCU, the value of key books increases. Now, number one on the list surprised me. No MCU spec at all. It's an interesting book, and that's Transformers number 72. It isn't even the last book of the series, but Transformers was very scarce. The average sale of a CGC 9.8 is $1,100. Now, the methodology I use in creating this list is I want to see at least 2.2 9.8 sales this year, or if there aren't two 9.8 sales for a scarcer book, maybe a 9.6 sale that we can double the price to estimate what a 9.8 would sell for. A lot of volatility here. There was a sale of $1,500 in November, and you go back to March, a $700 sale. Now you can get Raws for $20 to $30. Now here's the interesting thing about Transformers. The comic book, Transformers number 1, by Marvel, came out in 1984. This is 1996. This is exactly 6 years into the run, right? 6 times 12 is 72, issue number 72. There are other issues that we'll talk about briefly in the honorable mention, but it's the same concept. Transformers was aimed more at kids, right? The Saturday morning cartoon was preteen set, were the ones reading the books. 6 years later, many of those kids were no longer interested in the cartoon. The cartoon went off the air in 1987. They stopped buying the comic book. So the number of people that were collecting Transformers, had it on their pull list at the time, was minimal. When Transformers came out, I was in college. I wasn't watching Saturday morning cartoons in college. I wasn't big into Transformers. I didn't play with the toys. I was just too old for it. But those that were old enough to remember it in the 80s, by the time you get to the 90s, they probably weren't playing with the toys or watching the cartoon anymore. Cartoon wasn't on anymore. You wouldn't see a feature film until 2007. So then, retroactively, people go back and have that nostalgia when they start having disposable income and they want Transformers books. Well, if you want the complete run all the way through, I think issue 80 is the last issue, it's hard to find these later books because the print runs were very low. We don't have a complete print run count. Comic-Con, their complete numbers from Diamond don't go as far back as 1990, but we do know that it was scarce. There aren't a lot of them out there. So the fact of the matter is, if you see, I would say any issue after 50 in Transformers for like in a dollar bin, $3, even $5, I would be grabbing it. Again, Raws are only going $20 to $30. So, but there are very few 9.8 sales. Will this book continue to hold that value? I don't know. I can certainly see, like in the blink of an eye, Uncanny XMen 266 supplanting this as number 1. But based on the methodology that I've been using, the 2 sales from this year, although $800 apart, $1,500 and $700, do average out to $1,100, which is a little bit more than the average for Uncanny XMen, which is $1,040. Let's talk about honorable mentions, and we're going to group them together. There are some books, for instance, Transformers number 65 has had a $610 sale in a 9.8 this year. 71 has had a $185 sale. A lot of volatility there. Amazing Spider-Man is always the money book, right? This book has value no matter what the issue, even into the 90s. Now, McFarlane was working on it, so a lot of McFarlane covers in the earlier issues. Issue 328 has a McFarlane cover. Issue, I think it's, now I'm confused. I have the 337 is the first full appearance of the second full appearance of the Sinister Six. 332 has this Venom cover. 335, 339, 340, all have had sales of over $100 in a CGC 9.8, but those are kind of isolated. Now, it was also 1990 in which McFarlane left Amazing Spider-Man and started Spider-Man as a title. So Spider-Man number 1, which had an enormous print run. I don't know the exact numbers, but there are a lot of them out there, a lot of different versions. If you go on Cover Price, the number of variant covers is plentiful. There's second printings and third printings and alternates and silver covers and foil covers and gold covers and I don't know what else. But the standard cover, and for all of these books, I'm not delving into odd variants. I'm talking about the Direct edition, newsstands are always worth more, but as always, newsstands, there are fewer sales. So it's harder to get good sales data. SpiderMan #1, average sale in a CGC 9.8 is $138. Raw books, high grade, probably about the $25 range. Any show you're at, you're going to find it. If you find Spider-Man #1 at a garage sale at a flea market for under $10, it's probably, and it looks good, it's probably worth picking up because you could probably sell it for at least $20. Another book we talked about, Silver Surfer, issue 44, the first Infinity Gauntlet. Issue 34 is the Resurrection of Thanos. That's gone for as high as $255 in a CGC 9.8. And 35 reintroduces Thanos and Drax and starts the Infinity Gauntlet storyline with the Infinity Gems. In 1990, the Thanos Quest two-part miniseries by Jim Starlin came out, in which Thanos obtains all the Infinity Gems. He gets 3 of them from the Elders of the Universe in issue 1 and 3 more in issue 2. Wolverine is always a highly sought-after character, but his book was very popular at the time, a very large print run. The key issue from 1990 here is issue 27, which features this classic Jim Lee cover. That goes for about $247 in a CGC 9.8. Ghost Rider #2 has been the source of speculation this year. It's the first appearance of Blackout. That's more spec than anything else, but it does go north of $200 in a CGC 9.8. Incredible Hulk. 372, Hulk becomes green again. And in 376, it's Green Hulk versus Gray Hulk. Those books are also in the $200 range in a CGC 9.8. Marvel Tales, 236, 238, 239, all classic McFarlane covers, all CGCs have sold as high as $200. I don't know if you'd get that today, but again, it's an overlooked book. Avengers West Coast 56 is the first appearance of the Dark Scarlet Witch. There's been speculation on that since the WandaVision series and as we're leading into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. New Mutants. 87 was on the list as the first Cable. 86 is the first cameo of Cable. And 88 is the second full appearance of Cable. Uncanny XMen. 267 is the third appearance of Gambit. And 268 is this classic Jim Lee cover with Cap, Wolverine, and Black Widow. Another book that saw diminishing print runs, but they weren't as small as they were for Transformers at this time, is Akira. There are the books in the 20s, 22, 23, 25 have all sold for well over $100 in a CGC 9.8. Now, the last group of books we're going to talk about are issue #1s that came out in 1990. And Marvel did start a few long-running series in 1990, some with first appearances. One not part of the Marvel Comics itself, but a licensed property is RoboCop #1. That has sold for as high as $244 in a CGC 9.8. A book I really don't know about, Hero #1, has sold a one-off sale of $180, but raw sales are under $5. Might as well have a CGC 9.8 of Camp Candy #1, which is a book I want. I want that series. I think it was 6 issues. I never even knew it existed. I'm a huge John Candy fan. He had his own comic book. I'll be looking for that. I don't know who has that. And then 3 long-running series that started in 1990. Guardians of the Galaxy, which doesn't bear a lot of resemblance to the James Gunn films, but that book in a 9.8 sells for about $160. Namor the Submariner, his second modern ongoing series. He had his own series from the late Silver into early Bronze era. This was a long-running series, and #1 is really the only one that has any value to it. Raw copies under $10 all day. If you do have a high-grade 9.8, you might be able to get over $100 for it. And the same is true of New Warriors #1. These characters have kind of been put on the back burner of Marvel characters. There's not a lot of MCU spec about them right now, but you never know. And the same is true. You could dig through other books in here and find first appearance of characters that someone might decide to throw into a Disney Plus series, into as a side character, into a movie. A character gets, kind of a cameo in a film, and the book takes off. So that's it for our Marvel 1990 there were plenty of books to choose from on this list. Things might get a little thinner as we head towards the end of the decade, but the print runs will diminish. The crash is yet, the height of the market is yet to come, and we'll talk about that over the course of the next 9 weeks when we do Marvel 1990s. Let me know what you want up next. Should I do independents after Marvels? That's going to be a little bit more difficult to do the research. Image is coming in the 1990s. Or do I do another decade for DC or Marvel? So anyway, that's it for today. Guys, I hope everyone has a happy new year. My next video will be coming out in 2022. And so and in the meantime, you can take a look at this DC 1999 video and also this wrap up of my year in collecting in 2021. Until next time, enjoy your comics.